Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome into a brand new edition of Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. You can catch this on terrestrial radio in the Triad every Friday afternoon, WWBG 1470 AM at 5 p.m. in Greensboro, and you can hear it on WTOB 980 AM, 96.7 FM in Winston-Salem at 6 p.m. on Friday. Loaded show for today. Got some heavy hitters in the house today. Scott Fowler from the Charlotte Observer will come in and talk about the Panthers draft. David Glenn from North Carolina Sports Network will be here for the Sports Buffet. And leading us off from The Athletic, Brendan Marks, beat writer for Duke and North Carolina. I told you we got some heavy hitters today. So what's going on, Brendan? How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm good. Trying to keep up with all the portal madness, but all good.
So the portal's officially closed now as we are doing this show, correct?
Kind of. Be nice if there was an easy answer. So yes, the deadline has passed for players to notify their schools that they want to enter the portal. However, there are still going to be a couple of days of guys trickling in, because essentially if at 11:58 last night you decided, hey, I want to try the portal, and you sent one text to your coach or compliance officer and said, I think I want to go in the transfer portal, that is enough of a paper trail for schools to have to abide by it. So
really,
so you've seen a couple of people go in this morning. There are going to be people who kind of trickle in the next couple of days. Certain schools take longer to process the paperwork than others. But so yes, the deadline has passed, but don't be confused, because you will still see a few more names trickling in.
Oh my gosh, so it's kind of like a soft deadline, kind of.
Yeah. It's a pretty flimsy set of rules in terms of, you literally just have to send one text message saying, I want to try this, and that gets you in under the buzzer.
That's insanity. So let's dig into it here, because we have a lot to get to in terms of Carolina and Duke roster overhaul, so to speak. One going through a complete overhaul, and one kind of returning a lot of their players back. Let's start in Carolina. The big news this week: guard RJ Davis, the worst kept secret in Chapel Hill, coming back for his fifth season. All this is due to COVID and that fifth year that everyone was allowed to receive. A little bit of a different vibe with RJ, because RJ is only 22, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like he's an old guy coming back for a fifth year. He's still relatively young. There's a lot of seniors walking around that are 22. So give me what that means for Carolina and their ACC and national aspirations for next year. RJ Davis being the returning ACC player of the year and a first-team All-American.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's probably going to enter next season as the most recognizable face of college basketball. I mean, I'm expecting him to be the preseason ACC Player of the Year, preseason All-American, one of the preseason favorites to win the Wooden Award. I mean, everything that you basically could ask for. Like, he is a guy who has a national brand, who obviously put himself in the UNC history books last season. He's going to be the first honored jersey since Justin Jackson back in 2017. So he's already accomplished so much, and him coming back, really, it takes North Carolina from being like a fringe top 25, top 20 team, somebody who you'd expect to be in the tournament, but like if they made the Sweet 16 would be, sort of considered a success. With him, I mean, the expectation is going to be a national championship again. The roster is obviously not complete. Hubert Davis still has a few more scholarships that he can fill via the transfer portal, but with him coming in, a pair of top 10 recruits, the rest of the roster, like you mentioned, largely intact. I'll be interested to see what areas of his game RJ continues to take leaps in. I'd be interested to see, for example, if he ends up being more of like a setup guy than just a pure scorer that he was this year. But, he dramatically raises both the floor and the ceiling for North Carolina next season.
Follow him on Twitter at Brendan R. Marks. Brendan Marks joining us here from The Athletic, talking some Carolina and Duke hoops to start us off here on Franchise Players this week. Cade Tyson, the Belmont transfer, was another big signing for Carolina, or big news for Carolina this week, coming in to join the roster. Thoughts on Tyson and what he'll bring to the roster next year?
Yeah, that's your Cormac Ryan fill-in. He is a sharpshooter. He's a 45% from three guy. He's taken a ton of attempts. He's longer than Cormac Ryan was. He's about 6'7", 205, so he's a little bit bigger. I will say I don't know that he's quite as quick as Cormac was. I'll be interested to see how he defends opposing threes at the ACC level, because there are some dudes there. I mean, like, he might end up, guarding Cooper Flagg at Duke, and I don't know how that's going to go for him.
Big fun.
But I will say I think he's a great fit for what North Carolina wants. Again, as somebody who can stretch the floor. Cormac, when he came in last year, one of the things I was most excited about in the offseason, just from like a on-court perspective, was North Carolina wanted to get back to the secondary break, and Cormac Ryan was really good as a corner three-point shooter. And he actually was maybe not as good this season as he had been historically. Cade is even better than Cormac Ryan has ever been as a corner shooter. So the idea of him hitting some of those pitch-aheads, those outlets from Elliot Cadeau, from RJ Davis, from Seth Trimble, I really see him being able to capitalize on those. So, again, he's a starter. He's a sharpshooter. He's going to be one of those guys with RJ that North Carolina depends on from an offensive level, but he doesn't have to be the primary option. So it was a good portal addition in my perspective.
I always say you can always see who the good programs are, whether it's high school or college. Here, where I'm at in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, the high schools are kind of open enrollment, so it's kind of wide open. If you want to go play football at such and such school, you kind of can, as long as you got transportation to get there. So it's kind of opened up recruiting to a certain extent here. So it's pretty much legal to do it here, but it's not the same in every county across the state. In college basketball, I kind of look at it the same way, where my mentality is the great programs typically don't have kids that transfer out. They usually have a waiting list of kids trying to transfer in, and they hold on to their talent. And I'm looking at Carolina's roster, where a lot of people I thought would be depleted. Ingram's more than likely probably not coming back, I would imagine. I think he had a first-round grade last time I checked on him, like a late first. So I would think he's going to stay out. But they kind of returned pretty much the team they had last year, minus Armando and Harrison Ingram. Of course, Cormac Ryan and, some of the seniors. But the core, and now with RJ coming back, Elliot Cadeau being there for his second year, and some of these other guys, Jalen Winters and Jalen Washington, these guys that have been in the program now for a couple of years, Washington especially. What do you think? They've got 3 scholarships left, if I'm not mistaken. What do you think Hubert needs to get out of the portal to complete the roster? Because the only bigs I really see are Washington, Zayden High, which he'll be going to his sophomore season, and Dean Smith always said the biggest leap for their guys is from freshman to sophomore year. So who knows what Zayden might be, if anything. And then the kid Brown, the freshman that's coming in. What do they need some more post play, or are they going to play small ball, or what do you think Hubert's going to go after here?
Definitely need another big body. The question is just like what caliber of big body. So like right now, you mentioned bigs. The only center on the roster is Jalen Washington. He's the only center on the roster. James Brown is not a playable player next year. Washington is the only center. And so it depends on who you can get, right? If you can get a guy who is good enough to start over him, they've got Cliff Omori from Rutgers visiting. He's one of the better defensive bigs in college basketball. Definitely is not an offensive guy, but defensively he provides rim protection, is going to disincentivize shots in the paint. Like that's a guy who probably starts over Jalen Washington. But if you get somebody who maybe is not quite as developed, who can just be in a true rotation, they both play 20 minutes a game. Maybe Jalen Washington is your starter. He does have length. He does have a face-up game. He does offer some rim protection. The thing with him is just durability. He's had injury issues going back to high school, obviously torn ACL his last year in high school, rehabbed most of his freshman season, played a little bit more this year, but you need to add at least one more big body strictly from that perspective. And then to me, I think UNC also needs to add another wing. I mean, the backcourt is stacked. You've got Cadeau, you've got RJ, you've got Trimble, you've got Ian Jackson, who can play on the wing. But you've got Drake Powell, who comes in as a top 10 recruit, top 15 recruit. He'll play. I don't know that he's good enough to start right away, just from an offensive perspective. I'd be interested in seeing, and you've got Tyson, obviously. I'd be interested in seeing North Carolina add sort of another 3, maybe even somebody who's starting caliber, just to continue rounding that out. But, the backcourt is clearly the strength of this roster. And, I'd be interested to see actually how much of a 3-guard lineup we do see. Hubert's toyed with it in the past couple of seasons. John Shire down the road obviously ran with it for most of last season at Duke. I don't think it's inconceivable that we would see RJ, Seth Trimble, and Elliot Cadeau on the court at the same time, especially if Seth Trimble's 3-point shot continues coming around. But all those options are kind of on the table, especially to get the most out of the backcourt.
All right, so let's go 8 miles down the road to Durham, to Duke, where they've got a different situation going on with the roster, although John's done a pretty admirable job filling in the gaps here. 9 players have departed from Duke's Elite 8 roster over the past 30, 35 days or so. Do you think it was just more of a case of too many riches, that the guys that were leaving realized the guys coming in might threaten their minutes and it might be better to go elsewhere? Or do you think it's more of the rumored coaching gently pushing out to make way for the freshmen? What vibe do you get in terms of why some of these players left?
Yeah, it's not a vibe, I would say. I mean, from having spoken with people around the program, like this, it's so funny to me. Like, I guess I don't understand, but like, if you're a coach of a high major basketball team, if you're John Shire, if you're Hubert Davis, if you're Kevin Keatts, if you're any of these guys, at the end of the season, you have end of season meetings, and you tell those guys, listen, this is what you did for us this year. This is what you didn't do for us this year. And this is the role that we think you're going to have next year. Now, you have the opportunity to prove us wrong, but this is what we are expecting of you. And if you want this role, this is what we need to see from you to get there. If you tell a guy, hey, you did not do this year, for you to be a bigger piece, you're going to have to do all of this. And we don't necessarily think that's going to happen in one season. You're probably 2 years away. That to me is not gently pushing anybody out. That is a coach's job. Those conversations have, like, anybody as a fan or anything who's taken back by those conversations has never played a team sport, has never had a hard conversation with a coach before, because those have to happen. And so if John Shire tells a guy, like, I think Mark Mitchell's a great example. Mark Mitchell's been a starter at Duke for 2 years. He's been arguably the team's most versatile defender. He can guard anything from 1s through 5s. At the same time, John Shire can say to him, hey, Mark, we've got Cooper Flagg coming in next year. You and Cooper Flagg play the same position. Cooper Flagg is going to start. He is going to be our guy. He is the person we're building this team around. And unless you become a three-point shooter, you are not going to have the same role next season. Is that telling Mark Mitchell to transfer? I don't think it is. It's telling Mark the reality of the situation. And Mark thinks that he can play a bigger role somewhere. He thinks he can make more NIL, more money somewhere. It's his right and his obligation as a player to see what's best for him. So he goes in the portal. He finds a spot at Missouri that conceivably is going to compensate him from an NIL perspective, and he's going to be one of the faces of that roster. So it's a win-win. It's not pushing anybody out. In Duke's case, you have a transcendent player in Cooper Flagg coming in. Cooper Flagg is the best high school basketball player I've ever seen. He's better than Paolo was in high school. He's better than Brandon Ingram was in high school. He's better than Zion was in high school. He is better than all of them. He's the best high schooler I've ever seen. And you have one shot to build around him. So what John Shire did was he cleared the deck. He told a lot of guys, this is who I'm building around. These are the skill sets I need around them. And if you don't fit that, I understand you wanting to pursue other options. That is how this went down. And, people who think that he's like, I don't want you anymore. That's not the case. It's just you get one chance to build around a Cooper Flagg, and he wisely gave himself flexibility to go out and add pieces that support his new star.
So you're talking about them building around Cooper Flagg. Basically, they got 8 months to kind of get this together because everybody knows Flagg's only going to be here for a year and he's off to the NBA. He's the number 1 pick next year. How important is it in today's college basketball for Duke to get older? Because they have, it seemed like, made concentrated effort in the portal to find guys that are not necessarily known for the number of stars behind their name, but what they've done on the court at whatever respective school they're coming in from, which is a little bit of a difference from what they've done before in the portal. They really hit the portal harder this year than any other time during Shire's coaching career so far. So how important is it for Duke to reach those goals to get older in today's college basketball?
It's huge. Do you know, since the COVID pandemic, there has been one true freshman starter on a national championship team?
I just saw that. Yeah.
And it was Stephon Castle at UConn this year.
He wasn't even like a first or second scoring option for UConn either.
He was probably their 4th offensive option. So there was one 5-star. He was the only 5-star in the entirety of this year's Final Four. So college basketball, and a lot of it is because of this COVID year, and I'll be interested to see if it cycles out when that's done, if high school recruiting becomes more of a priority. But you have to be old to win today. And so, yes, John went out. He gets Mason Gillis, who is a super senior transfer. He's 24 years old from Purdue, and he fits exactly what Duke wants. He's going to defend. He's going to shoot the 3 ball. He provides spacing around Cooper Flagg, and he can defend opposing fours so Cooper Flagg can roam around defensively and be a center fielder. You bring in Malik Brown, a guy who was an all-ACC defender, somebody who had the last 5x5 game in the last 25 years of college basketball, which is crazy. You ever think about that? 5 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 steals, 5 blocks in a game. So you bring in a guy like that who, again, is going to give you length. He gives you experience. And these are guys who have been through it before. So I think, adding experience in the portal was equally as much of a priority as it was adding guys who support Cooper Flagg's skill set. So again, Duke still has scholarships available to play with. They're going to continue adding guys. They need to add another guard to go behind Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster. They will. But that's the name of the game. Get old, get guys who fit around what you already have coming back. I think what we saw at Duke this summer, and we'll continue to see it with the guys they bring in, it's kind of like a reset a little bit of what Duke's culture has been. You see him, obviously, it's a giant freshman class, but he's embracing the portal more than ever. He's going for age. He's trying to build this elite defensive team. I think it's been a little bit of a reset in a good way for Duke this summer.
I had another question that was more water, but I'm gonna save it for next time you come in. Real quick though, so with everything that's changed with Duke's roster, everything that's happened with UNC's roster, if a gun to your head, you had to pick who's going to win the ACC right now, May 2nd, 2024, would you pick Duke? Would you pick Carolina, or would you pick the rest of the ACC field?
Yeah, right now, just because there's still a decent amount of uncertainty, I think of those two, I think they're both going to be, top 10-ish teams. But I would go with Duke right now, just because I think they're building what could be the best defense in college basketball. I mean,
Wow.
I mean, they're going to be elite defensively next year. You're talking about a starting lineup that probably is going to be all 6'5" and taller. Probably going to have 6'5" Tyrese Proctor, 6'5" Caleb Foster, 6'9" Flag, 7'1" Kaman Ball Walk, and then one other, power forward.
Yeah.
If it's Malik Brown, he's 6'9" too. Like, you're talking about a gigantic jumbo-sized lineup that specializes on defense. So Tyrese Proctor is an elite point of attack defender. Flag is an elite defender. Mal Walk is going to be an elite shot blocker. Like, that defense is going to be really, really good. And then, again, I've heard some people say, Cooper Flag's reclassifying. How good can he really be? Like, I have seen this kid play a bunch. College basketball fans, get ready. Like, he is that guy. And so for North Carolina, obviously, like getting RJ Davis back is a huge feather in the cap. I'd be interested to see who they still add. I think North Carolina can get to that point. I think they're going to be the two best teams in the ACC. What's new. But I do think right now Duke probably has the upper hand of the two of them.
So the more things change, the more things stay the same. Carolina and Duke doing Carolina and Duke things. Follow Brendan Marks on Twitter /X at Brendan R. Marks, and go read his work at The Athletic. The college basketball season is over, but Brendan's season is not.
Sadly, it is not.
Definitely go check out his stuff. Appreciate you coming through, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Coming up, Charlotte Observer Scott Fowler stops by to talk about the Panthers and their draft and their offseason as a whole. Back in just a bit here on Franchise Players on Tobacco Road Sports Radio.
In professional sports, a franchise player is an athlete who is not simply the best player on their team, but one that the team can build their franchise around for the foreseeable future.
Welcome back into Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. Scott Fowler was going to appear. He will be on with us next week. Had some technical difficulties. So instead, we've got Demetri Ravanos from the OG Triangle Media Company. What better way to bring him in with some little brother, little Raleigh vibes going on there. They're out in the Triangle doing their thing. He is the co-host of, and I want to make sure I get the title right, This Team is Killing Us podcast with Lauren Brownlow, talking about our beloved Carolina Panthers. They just got through this draft weekend. Optimism is high, which it usually is around early May here in the Carolinas regarding the Panthers. What's going on, Demetri? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm feeling that optimism. I sort of ran, excuse me, a little bit of a model today, just kind of to get an idea of what I thought the roster looked like coming out of the draft, what I think it will look like coming out of training camp. And I got to say, I don't think, and listen, Triad, don't hold me to this. I don't think this is the worst team in the NFC South this year.
See, and that's what I was telling Stu and Skylar on Bleav in Panthers. I'm like, should we be this optimistic? Because we told ourselves at the end of the year to not get optimistic no matter what happened, because we weren't going to set ourselves up like the Looney Tunes cartoon again and have the carpet yanked out from underneath us. But I got to say, from the free agency signings to the draft this past weekend, it actually looks like they're competent, like they're actually making sense. Like what they're doing, it's weird. Like I don't know what to do with my hands. Like it's just,
even though I didn't love the doubling down on linebacker, I didn't think it made a whole lot of sense. I have more questions from coming out of the draft about what they didn't do versus what they did, and I think that's pretty natural with this team because there were a lot of needs, obviously.
Right, and they still got some, issues. Depth is still an issue, even coming out of the draft, and we'll see. There may be a lot of these undrafted free agents that they signed that actually might stick around on this team just for depth purposes. So we'll
remember we're going to have cap cuts coming too, which could provide the opportunity to add some some veterans that have been great performers in the past, and maybe now they'd be depth, or with a team like the Panthers, maybe they get another year to start.
Absolutely. And looking around the NFC South, I gotta agree. I mean, I don't know what Atlanta's doing. We can we can get into that.
Listen, I think Atlanta is going to be in it till the end. I still think, like, Tampa kept everybody. Why would you pick someone different to win the division? But Tampa's going to win the division probably with 9 or 10 wins. This isn't out of the realm of possibility.
And people forget too, with all of the nonsense that was going on in Charlotte last year. Even having said that, looking back on the season, there was maybe 4 or 5 games where we were in it at the very end somehow, despite ourselves. Like, we were like a score away from actually tying or taking a lead or whatever in the fourth. We weren't in the lead in any of those fourth quarters, but we were close. Like, so it wasn't like the team was getting blown out every weekend or whatever. Like, they somehow were still kind of, and that's kind of the NFL as a whole. Like, you're not going to really find a team that's so bad that they're just getting waxed by 25 like every week. It's not college football, but
right. Well, I mean, interestingly, that is why I tell everybody to, like, even if you're optimistic, just be patient, because, like, look, if the Panthers had a worse defense, they would be that team getting whipped by 25 every
that
week
is true.
last year. But there's so much change over the defense. Luvu, the emotional leader, is gone. Burns, the on-field leader, is gone. The secondary is a collection of a whole bunch of new guys. I would have been okay if literally all 7 picks had been offensive players this year, because the defense is a longer term rebuild. That is why you cannot call this team, I think, even in a bad division this year. And that's okay. Both sides have to be rebuilt in the way that the NFL works. That doesn't happen quickly if you don't have a whole lot of cap money. Well, guess what? At the end of this coming season, the Panthers will have a whole lot of cap money. So, be patient. It's all going to be put back together. I think I like Dan Morgan's moves as a GM so far. The question now is, will he be allowed to do his job?
Yeah, we'll get to that. So this is a Bleav in Panthers Extra segment. You'll be able to hear the audio of this segment exclusively on the Bleav podcast networks. The video, of course, will be inside of Franchise Players on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio YouTube channel, and of course, you'll be able to hear it on terrestrial radio on Friday in Greensboro and Winston-Salem across the Triad. Demetri Ravanos joining us here on Franchise Players. I want to do a little Panthers True or False draft edition. So let's get into it. True or false? Running back Jonathan Brooks will be the pick we look at 4 years later as the cream of this class. True or false?
False, just because of the way we look at running backs now. I think, and also I think that in Xavier Legette, they have a piece that's going to be there for a long time. I think Brooks is going to be very good. I think that Panthers fans need to find the middle ground, right? He's going to be very good, and he's coming off of an ACL injury. Don't go to one end of the spectrum or the other. I would have advocated for drafting Trey Benson out of Florida State because he is ready to go right now. But I think Jonathan Brooks' ceiling is much, much higher.
He had, I think, like 62 missed or broken tackles in FBS before he got injured last year, which was second overall at that point in the season. So he's elusive. We haven't had anybody like that really since Christian McCaffrey. So I was shocked he was on the board.
Steve Sarkisian still loves to do that bell cow running back sort of thing at Texas, and Brooks was behind Bijan Robinson for 2 years. So he has saved a lot of wear and tear by being in that Texas offense.
And I do like that as well. So seeing him come in and maybe possibly pair either with Chuba or even Miles. I don't know how long Miles Sanders might be on the roster. But
yeah, I mean, Miles's contract is prime for a cap cut. I would expect that to happen.
Yeah, so we'll see, and we'll see if they flip that out. Just the fact that they drafted a running back in the second round tells me that Dave Canales and Dan Morgan look at that running back room and they're like, let's add some juice to it. Like, we need something else. Yeah. And if anything, it told me, all right, they're not just giving us lip service like we've been used to the past 2 coaches that have been here, where they've said we're going to run the ball, and then they do the exact opposite on Sunday. This kind of, from all the moves they've made, it looks like they're going to run the ball like a lot. So,
I think Canales probably learned. I think Canales probably learned in his year running the offense down in Tampa Bay that if you don't have that dude And you could make the argument that Rachaad White emerged as that dude for the Buccaneers. But if you don't have that dude you can count on in the backfield, it does make things harder on your quarterback. And look, as much as I love him, if your quarterback is Bryce Young, you cannot make things harder on the guy.
Right. And if anything's like they've made things easier. Everything looks like it's been set up to help Bryce, which is what they should have did last year, but they didn't. So we'll kind of see how this plays out. Demetri Ravanos joining us here from This Team is Killing Us podcast over on the OG Triangle Media YouTube channel. Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen will probably be penciled in as starting wide receivers by the time we get to week 1. True or false, Xavier Legette will be the starter by mid-season?
Well, I mean, look, do you mean the X? Because obviously they're going to be starting 2-3 wide receivers.
Yeah, let's say the X, or just out there starting, like playing. Like he doesn't necessarily have to be option number 1, but
playing, he'll be out there week 1. Like he's clearly the second best receiver on the team right now. Maybe third. I guess you do have to give Thielen credit for what he did last year, but I think it's pretty obvious that at least to start the season, Johnson's going to be the X. Legette is going to be the Z, and Thielen's going to be in the slot.
I can live with that. That sounds fine to me. I mean, Deontay Johnson, didn't he lead the league in separation or something like that? Or he was up at the top of the leaderboard?
So I would be lying if I told you that I dove deep into the stats on anybody but the Panthers. What I can tell you is Xavier Legette is really good at turning slant patterns into, and he's gone. And if you have a couple of guys that are capable of doing that, and look, I'm not giving up on Jonathan Mingo. Like Jonathan Mingo can create separation and he can catch the ball. Last year, he just couldn't do both at the same time, which if he can put that together, then suddenly you've got some nice weapons.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And there's wide receivers on this roster that like Terrace Marshall Jr. is still on this roster. Like, I don't know how, but he's still here. Like, and he was a second-round pick from that LSU team that scored 1 billion points with Joe Burrow at quarterback. Jonathan Mingo, our pick from last year, still on the roster.
I was advocating on so leading up to the draft every day, I did a Panthers mock draft on our podcast, and I had started advocating for late in the draft, round 6, maybe round 7, for them to take a second wide receiver, namely Ainias Smith out of Texas A&M, because number one, when you consider that a guy with that speed was on the same offense with Devon Achane, like it clicks immediately. Oh, Jimbo Fisher should have been fired.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is that I think Smith was a guy built to not only be a great receiving weapon, but also he would be and is going to be, I can't remember who ended up picking him. He's going to be a star with these new kickoff rules. I think that's the kind of thing that actually could benefit receivers and running backs too, which is why like maybe Miles Sanders does have a place on this roster. With the kickoff rule changing, it really does create for more useful game development for your weapons, because now the kickoff is like any other play.
Yeah, and what people aren't talking about as much, but it's going to be kind of a jolt when we get to the fall and people realize, oh, that's right, they changed the kickoff rules, because it's totally different than anything anybody's used to, unless you watch XFL or any of that stuff, because that's where it came from. I think it is going to change the role of those kickoff returners. I just saw something come across my phone on ESPN where I think a coach in Pittsburgh is actually suggesting they use Justin Fields as a returner or something like that. So
interesting. I mean, I think that, given the way, and for people that don't know, it's basically the kicking team lines up across from the blockers at about 10 yards of separation, and they can't go until the returner has the ball in his hands, and so that it becomes more like a play. We're going to see more running backs get that job because you've got to have field vision now. It's not just about can you blow past guys.
Right. And like you can't do wedges and that kind of stuff. So it's literally, if you get past the first like 1 or 2 guys are right there in front of you, there's no one back there but the kicker, if you can outrun the other 11 guys and avoid the kicker coming at you, I can see kickers starting to get bigger deals because of this, because they're going to become a critical part of the defense going forward. I think people scored in the XFL. I saw some crazy stat. They scored like 80% of the time or something nuts on kickoff returns. So I don't know. We'll see. This is a different animal in NFL, but
it's why I can't watch the XFL. But as the kickoff rule was being proposed, I did watch a couple of those kicks in action, and it looks good. It looks like a football play. They didn't take the kickoff out, and they found a way to make it more relevant to the action of the game.
It was starting to get phased out of the game completely. So we'll see how that goes. Let's stick with wide receiver though. True or false? Here on the Bleav Panthers Extra on franchise players. Undrafted free agent wide receiver Jalen Coker from Holy Cross will actually make the team. True or false?
I think that is false. And you mentioned the reason why a moment ago. With Terrence Mann Jr. still on the roster, I think it is fair to say we know 4 slots for sure that are going to be filled, right? There is no doubt in anyone's mind that Johnson, Leggett, Thielen, and Mingo are going to be receivers on this roster. If they kept Terrence Marshall Jr., it means they like Terrence Marshall Jr. enough to bring him back. So let's say he is probably number 5. That leaves 1 spot available.
And they re-signed the Smith-Marset kid, didn't they?
Say that one more time.
Didn't they re-sign the Smith-Marset kid early in free agency?
They did, but if you look at various projected depth charts, Smith-Marset is classified in some interesting ways, right? Like some have him classified as a running back, some have him classified even as a tight end, just to get those extra weapons in there. But to that point, also guys that are unsigned, like nobody jumped on Laviska Shenault. Why would you not bring him in just to see, right? Because just like an undrafted free agent, he's going to be super cheap. Like, why not just bring him in on a camp deal and see if he can make the roster?
It feels like there's going to be a lot of bodies like that too. Really just more from Steve Smith kind of landing on this kid, his size and everything else, and what he said about him last week. And it immediately made me remember, oh, well, Smitty was the one that was on Tank Dell last year at this time of year. You know, he was the one that was hyping Tank, and Tank Dell pretty much played out the expectations. So I'm kind of rooting for him because it's like 6'3", like 215 pounds or something to that effect. So he'd be a big guy out there.
Look, I mean, like right before the draft, I think an actual measurement said that Leggett was about 2 inches shorter than he had been billing himself as. So maybe that is one of those things where, hey, we do need that just massive body on this roster because we thought we had a chance to get that, and now we don't have it.
Yeah, so and they can always, we haven't really had a big receiver since Kelvin Benjamin. Yeah. So, and we haven't had a really big, good wide receiver since Moose.
That 1 year Benjamin.
The 1 year Benjamin and Moose's career. So, like, other than that, we haven't really had a lot of big guys like that. So, let's go rapid fire real quick so I can get you the last 2. Do or die season for quarterback Bryce Young in year 2 in today's NFL. True or false?
True. I mean, he didn't even have weapons last year. If it is another season where he does not at least show improvement, they're picking number 1 again. And even if you don't think the quarterback class is good, it tells you don't have the guy.
So he's number 1 overall, though. But yeah, you're right. Because it's like, how long do you want it to go while you're still building the rest of the roster? You don't want to waste
here's the other thing,
4 or 5 years.
If 2 years out of 3 and now 2 years in a row, you're ending up with the number 1 pick, maybe you're not done building the roster, but maybe it means you can't build a roster around that guy. Doesn't mean he can't play in the NFL. It means he can't play for you. I think he's got to show vast improvement this year. And I say that as somebody that is only a Panthers fan because of Bryce Young.
Right. And you are an Alabama fan. So like you've seen a lot of Bryce Young tape over the past, 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Yeah. So I mean, so you know about this kid, you know about his makeup, you know what he's about, you know that the ceiling he can get to, and I want him to succeed. But in today's NFL, we just saw Chicago trade off Justin Fields this past offseason. He wasn't the number 1 overall pick, but he was their first round pick from
but look,
2 years ago,
from his draft, everybody but the number 1 pick has been bailed on by their first team.
Yep, Trey Lance, all of them guys. Only Trevor Lawrence is the only one, and even Trevor Lawrence hasn't exactly lived up to top pick billing yet. And I mean, he kind of got Urban Meyer that first season, but other than that, I mean, he's
not only that, he also is getting Trent bulkied, where like, oh, we're gonna get you an awesome receiver, but he's only capable of playing the slot. Oh, we're gonna get you another awesome receiver, but he's suspended for a year, so you'll have.
He likes to gamble, year. So yeah, little things like that. But we'll overcome it. We'll overcome it. You're Trevor Lawrence, and then I saved the best for last. True or false? Panthers owner David Tepper is the worst owner in sports. True or false?
True.
So it's true, because I mean that's a pretty wide statement, like across all sports, like all of he's the worst owner of all of them.
Are we talking American sports? Because I can't tell you who soccer team owners are in other countries.
It's just American professional sports: NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL. Is he the worst?
Yeah, I mean, look, James Dolan is up there. Don't get me wrong, but Dave
Next
Tepper. Yeah, well, that's the thing. The Knicks are winning. The Rangers are relevant. Like, he at least has put products on the court and / ice that are interesting to watch. Tepper hasn't even done that, right? Like, he's rolled through coaches. He doesn't let his GM make the pick. The video from inside Dilworth Neighborhood Grill, I told Lauren. Lauren saw the video and said, "Oh, he's more peaceful than I thought he would be." And I said, well, he's peaceful on the surface. That is a guy walking in there wishing someone would say something to him.
Yeah,
because I think it does not even dawn on him how lucky he is not to have been stuffed in a trunk when he took that dude's hat off of.
Yeah, I know. There's some things you don't do. I know you're a billionaire or whatever, but keep your hands to yourself, man. Like, you can't just take somebody's hat off like it's going to be fine. If that was somebody different, there might have been some furniture moving in that restaurant.
I'll reiterate here what I said on my podcast. I don't mind being bald at all. But as a fat bald, I am like catnip to massive, right? And so if we are in like the PNC Arena for a Hurricanes game and Stormy comes up to me, I would 1,000 times out of 1,000 rather him rub my belly than my head. There is something so condescending about a stranger touching your head in any way.
It really is, especially if it's a billionaire and they're like, what are you doing with that hat? Like,
right. At least please be dressed like a pig in a hockey jersey.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please somewhat normal. I don't know if I want to. I don't know necessarily if he is the worst owner or if I just don't want to be a fan of the team who has the worst owner. So I don't want to call him it, so it's two different things here, but you're right. I mean, he took over the team in 2019, and they have not had a winning season since. He's basically in some shape or form, whether it's through him or through people working underneath him, shoot away a lot of the stars of the previous regime, including Cam Newton.
You don't even have to think of it from that standpoint. Just think about the way he treats fans, right? The way he talks about the people of Charlotte, like it's some, hillbilly backwater. And by the way, this isn't a dude coming from New York. This is a dude coming from Pittsburgh. Like, relax.
Right? Yeah, that's the crazy part. Yeah,
you're not like the peak of sophistication. But the other thing too is like, look, as bad of a person as James Dolan seems to be. Find me the video of him throwing a drink on fans out of the window of his luxury box, right? Like, that says a lot about who Dave Tepper is as a dude.
Is it possible for him to just like not be in the spotlight for a season? Like,
yes!
I mean, he actually did pretty well up until this moment.
Yes, it's very possible.
For him, is it possible for him? Because he went so far from introducing Dan Morgan and Dave Canales. That was the last time we saw him. The infamous him. Who was he talking? It wasn't Scott Fowler. It was oh my gosh, my guy. He was talking to him in the press conference, and he asked him how involved he was going to be, and he was like, "I'm in the background now," or whatever, and that hit the news and everything else. And then literally, we didn't see him. Like, he vanished, like a supervillain. He was just gone until it was time for him to come back again.
The people at Dilworth Neighborhood Grill may not realize that they have just activated Dave Tepper back to being so hands-on. And look, I don't blame them. Like, any chance to take a billionaire down a peg, I'm all for it, particularly a billionaire that is ruining our favorite football team.
Yeah, I mean, and next time, Dave, just drive past the sign, man. That's not even the first time they put something on that sign about the Panthers. Just drive. I know it's a mile away from Bank of America Stadium. You're going to pass it every day on the way to work. Just don't even look at it, or tell the driver to go a different route. Let's just not go by Dilworth today. Let's just go.
That's the thing. If you're the driver, it's your responsibility to know a different route.
Just go. Don't even wait to be asked. Just be like, you know what, Mr. Tepper, I found a better route to the stadium today. Let's go this way. So I don't know. We'll see. But the Panthers, at least they give us content. They give us something to discuss each week, whether it's good or bad. They give us something to put some hooks into. Follow Demetri on Twitter /X at Demetri Ravanos, and you can also go and rate and subscribe their YouTube channel. I think if you're on YouTube, look up Ovies and Gilio, and it'll pop up the YouTube channel that way. And not hard to find at all. Host of the This Team Is Killing Us podcast with Lauren Brownlow. Just Google that. You can find episodes there as well, including the most recent episode where you gave a straight to Josh Graham at the very end, which to me was hilarious. Hilarious.
Look,
it is what it is.
People defending Dave Tepper.
Right, yeah. And when you said, I was like, yeah, he's got a point. So check with them later on. Appreciate you coming on, Demetri.
Yeah, you bet, buddy.
Coming up, David Glenn, batting cleanup as usual. Every 2 weeks he comes in and does the sports buffet. We'll be back in just a bit here on Franchise Players.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome back to Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. Shout out to our guest from earlier today, Demetri Ravanos from OG Triangle Media, coming in to do the Bleav in Panthers Xtra segment. And, of course, starting us off from the Athletic, Brendan Marks, giving us updates on Carolina and Duke hoops roster movement, and there has been quite a bit here over the past 30 days. Joining us right now from the North Carolina Sports Network, it is David Glenn, joining us every couple of weeks for the Sports Buffet. What's going on, DG?
I'm doing great, Des. Always good to be with you.
So I got a lot I want to touch on. Some of it's stuff that I just need help with. So I do a sports minute for WTOB here in Winston-Salem that runs like on the top of the hour after noon, like throughout the afternoons, like 5 or 6 times during the day. So I go through and find different sports stuff that's related to whatever it would be for North Carolina, and I go and I punch it in there really right about now. And the past couple of weeks, I've had to talk about the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm not a Carolina Hurricane fan. I'm not an NHL fan, but I can't ignore what they're doing. They're having a fantastic season. They just defeated the New York Islanders 4-1 in the first round of their best-of-7 Stanley Cup series. It's going to give them a matchup against the New York Rangers in round 2. Give me, a non-hockey guy, the number one reason why I should check out the Carolina Hurricanes.
Well, this is one of the best teams the Canes have ever had in their 25-plus years in North Carolina now. The former Hartford Whalers, of course, who relocated here in the late 1990s. Rod Brind'Amour is one of the best head coaches in the NHL. Sebastian Aho is one of the most prolific offensive players in the NHL. Jacob Slavin's one of the best defensemen in the NHL. And they have a goalie in Freddie Anderson who's been playing really well after missing a big chunk of the season with a medical issue. So that's kind of the nucleus. They've been really good since Tom Dundon bought the team about 6 years ago. They had missed the playoffs 9 straight years, Des, which was one of the longest droughts in NHL history. Wow. Remember, this is a sport where half the teams make the playoffs every year. Canes went from 9 straight missing the playoffs to now 6 straight making the playoffs. And in that 6-year stretch, this may be their best team. Of course, they won the Stanley Cup almost 20 years ago at this point. And there's a lot of competition. But from this stage forward, the second round, man, the Canes are great. The Rangers are great. They're going head to head. Teams like the Bruins and the Panthers are really, really good. They're waiting in the round after that. There's some teams out west that are really, really good. There's nothing like playoff hockey. I know I'm biased because I grew up with it, but playoff hockey to me is one of the greatest things in all the sports world, and especially if you can get there live.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because I was just sitting back thinking about it. When I was a kid, I used to love watching hockey, like in the Olympics, like watching the U.S. team. Like I'd get up for it, and like so. I understand the rules in the game, and I've watched hockey before, so it's not like a ew, what's that type of thing. I think it's been harder for me to kind of allow myself to gravitate to the Hurricanes, even though they're an hour down the road for me, and more likely they're going to be the pro team that brings home a championship trophy before the Hornets and the Panthers do. So I need to get more involved with what they're doing, and it does feel exciting in terms of what they're doing. I had heard that the Rangers are just as good as Carolina, and this probably shouldn't be a second round matchup, but we'll see what Carolina does here as they try to advance. Let's shift over to the ACC real quick. We just had Brendan Marks on earlier in the show, and he was talking about RJ Davis making his formal announcement, probably the worst kept secret in Chapel Hill, that he was returning for his 5th season. Thoughts on RJ coming back for his 5th season, and where does that put Carolina in your mind now that RJ and Seth Trimble pulled himself out of the portal? He's coming back as well.
It's huge. Nobody has had a better offseason than the North Carolina Tar Heels, because the guys they lost, remember, were either out of eligibility, Armando Bacot, Cormac Ryan, et cetera. You can't do anything about that. Or left early for the NBA. Harrison Ingram liked his draft projection. But the Tar Heels, remember, this is going to be an 18-team ACC next year. And right. I have followed all 18 programs. There is only one that lost only a single player to the transfer portal, and it's the Tar Heels. Wow. And that player was a backup center who wasn't going to play next year anyway. That is by far the smallest. Remember, Duke lost 2 starters to the portal in Jeremy Roach and Mark Mitchell. Louisville lost 12 players to the portal. There are other ACC teams that lost 7, 8, 9. This is a 13 scholarship sport. And when I say they lost 8, 9, 12, I'm not talking about guys who exhausted their eligibility. I'm talking about 8, 9, 12 portal entries guys who are going to finish their career somewhere else. That's more than half your roster. Hubert Davis lost one guy, gets great news when Trimble changed his mind, gets even bigger great news when RJ Davis uses his COVID year in Chapel Hill, as was kind of expected. They have 2 prep All-Americans coming in on the wing, and Ian Jackson and Drake Powell. They signed a kid from Belmont as a transfer, and Cade Tyson, that shoots 47% from three-point land.
Number 1 in the country, yeah.
Right. Really, all they need is one more big man, which they're pursuing in the portal right now. And Hubert Davis is going to have one of the most well-rounded rosters in America if he gets that big man. And whether or not he gets an ideal big man, the Heels are going to be preseason top 10 nationally. And the Heels will have one of the best backcourts in America when you add up RJ Davis, Elliot Cadeau, Seth Trimble, Ian Jackson, Drake Powell, and Cade Tyson. Those are 6 pretty good options in a sport that we talk about the importance of guards during March Madness especially. That is an incredibly strong foundation for the former UNC guard Hubert Davis as the Heels head coach.
I love the way he's built his team. It's a mixture of experience. It's a mixture of 5 stars, freshmen. You kind of get the vibe no freshman's going to really start. If there might be one, might be Jackson that might start. But he's kind of pulled it back to the way Dean Smith had it, where those teams were built in this way. And I mentioned it last year at the beginning of the year. The team he had last year reminded me of a Dean Smith team and the way it was constructed. And it's kind of like, imagine like a billboard that just has slots, like player 1, player 2, player 3, like to build a Dean Smith team. And like he took that template and just like, okay, I'm going to change it a little bit, but I need this type of player playing small forward. I need this guy playing center. I need this running a point, like in order for the Dean Smith cake to actually bake or whatever. And that's kind of what he's doing. So I as a Carolina fan and old school at that, I love what I'm watching. So I have no problem with Brendan and I were talking about the NCAA potentially making a 5th year of eligibility available for all players going forward. Is the rumor out there. And this was off camera actually. And we were discussing, I was like, you know what? I wouldn't have a problem with that at all, because to me, college basketball from the past 5 years, I was finding myself, it was harder for me to stay attached to it because of the way it was in terms of one and dones and players not really being in a program long enough for you to learn who they are and watch them grow like it was when I was a kid. And with the NIL deal and the transfer portal and this extra COVID year now, it's made it where teams, you kind of can recognize a team from the players who they've been around 5 years, or you know that player from someplace else because they've transferred in. You kind of know who they are anyway. So it's changed college basketball and it's in. Let's go to college football, ACC. Whenever I get an opportunity to get an update from you about the court cases for FSU and Clemson against the ACC to leave the league, I do so. There's been some movement in court. We won't go into the nuts and bolts of what's exactly been happening in the past week, but for those that don't know, Florida State and Clemson are in court separately against the ACC in an attempt to get out of the league's grant of rights media deal, and so they can leave the league, but really without penalty is their goal. But really, they're trying to figure out how much money it's going to cost for them to get out. Some sort of mediation or something is what they're really aiming for, and the ACC really has no reason to do that. It feels like to me, DG, if FSU and Clemson are given eventually the green light to leave the ACC at some point down the road, right now, should the ACC be proactively recruiting more schools to compensate that, knowing that down the road that, I mean, either way, it looks like they're trying to leave no matter what happens. It's just a matter of when it's going to be. Should ACC be pulling in other schools right now, or what schools are out there that would make sense?
Yeah, it's not a long list. I think the ACC already did what you just described. In fact, when they added Stanford and Cal and SMU, who all arrived this summer, they went from a 15-team to an 18-team league. That's actually important for TV purposes because there's a clause in the ACC's contract with the ESPN that if the league had fallen below 15 members, there were certain negative repercussions where ESPN could downgrade the value of the TV deal. Obviously, if FSU and Clemson will leave, you're right. It's just a matter of when and at what cost. That's what these lawsuits are about. It's not going to happen anytime soon, by the way. This is not going to be resolved in the 2024 calendar year. These lawsuits are already 6 months in. They're going to go another 6 months. They're going to go into 2025 in all likelihood. You could have a settlement at any time, but you're not going to have a legal conclusion anytime soon. I can promise you that. There's 4 different lawsuits, remember. There's jurisdiction arguments. There's all sorts of – I mean, it's lawyer fatigue at this point. And I believe Florida State and Clemson want to exhaust the ACC with legal filings. I think they know they have the lesser arguments legally, so they just want to get to the point of lawyer fatigue, and the ACC says, okay, we'll settle. But to answer your question, if Florida State and Clemson get out at a low price, it's not going to be zero. I can promise you that. But let's say they somehow get out for $150 million each. That's a lot of money. But in today's world, it's no longer astronomical money. When these schools in the Big Ten right now are getting $60 million checks every year from their conference office, if you end up in a wealthier league, you make up that $150 million over a period of time, right? But this is going to come to a negotiation at some point, probably in the next calendar year. If the Seminoles and the Tigers lose $400+ million in value, then there's not going to be any race for others to leave. The ACC would be watered down, but they would look like the current Big 12. The current Big 12 doesn't have any super heavyweights in football. Yeah. And it's a functional second-tier league. The Big 10 and the SEC are printing money in the backyard, all by themselves, the two of them. The ACC is kind of 1B behind those top 2 leagues. If they lose the Seminoles and the Tigers, they'll be kind of like just tier 2 alongside the Big 12. They could still function. Now, again, if the Tigers and the Seminoles somehow get some surprise legal victories, that would open the floodgates to a more wide-ranging realignment in college athletics. Because remember, the ACC isn't the only league with a grant of rights. Right. If a judge somewhere says this violates antitrust law or whatever, there are massive repercussions for the future of college sports. And oh, by the way, ESPN has to tell the ACC by February of 2025 whether it will exercise that option for the final 9 years of the TV deal. So
it didn't end 2036. It's really 2027, right?
So the 2027 is is the locked in time frame. And then ESPN has this unilateral clause, have to tell the ACC by next February whether they want that last 9 years as negotiated. Now, if they somehow opted out, obviously the ACC needs to find massive new TV partners. It would have about a 2-year time frame before the 2027 ESPN deal expired. So the lawsuit is about the law and some of those practical lawyer fatigue issues. But ESPN plays a role here, and what ESPN wants can impact these ongoing lawsuits from the outside. There's no doubt about it.
I'm trying to think of a scenario where ESPN would not want ACC network, because if they do that, it's not just football, it's basketball, it's like all this other stuff, right? That ESPN is not just football that this is dealing with, it's the media rights for all of the athletics for these schools. So I don't know.
There's a lot going on there, Des. There's a lot going on. On the one hand, Florida State has already pissed off ESPN by trying to make public the ESPN private TV deal.
Yeah, they didn't like that.
ESPN lawyers are in court saying you're about to expose our trade secrets because of your, open records arguments, et cetera. So I don't know why the Seminoles want to antagonize ESPN. ESPN's motivation is to make sure ESPN keeps the TV rights to the Seminoles and the Tigers. Yeah. They already own them through 2036 under the grant of rights if they want to exercise that option. ESPN's fear would be if Florida State and Clemson leave the ACC and then jump to the Big Ten, then they're part of the Fox.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah. So it wouldn't, yeah.
But I agree with your starting point. ESPN has a below market value TV deal with the ACC that includes the rights to the Seminoles and the Tigers through 2036. Why would they give that up if the terms of that deal are more favorable to ESPN than they are to the ACC? Now, on its face, I don't think they would. I think they'd exercise their option. But if there are bigger forces at play here, the Seminoles and the Tigers end up in the SEC, well, then ESPN still has their rights because of their long-term relationship with the Southeastern Conference. So there's a lot of moving parts, man, and only some of those moving parts are in the courtroom in front of judges.
I'm kind of surprised someone like Amazon or Google hasn't stepped in yet to be like, hey, ACC, why don't you let the ESPN thing go through and we'll pick you up and actually double your thing or whatever, and you be exclusive on Amazon Prime or something to that effect. I know Amazon's trying to get into it.
Read up on how the Pac-12 fell apart. The long story short is the Pac-12 tried to do what you just described, and they were telling the traditional TV people, hey, I don't know these numbers off the top of my head, but hey, Amazon / so-and-so are offering us 30-some million a year per school. And the traditional TV partners were not budging. They weren't going up. In the end, the Pac-12 alienated the traditional TV partners and didn't get the deal.
That's the part. Yeah, you got to get the deal.
With the streaming partners. And the Pac-12 members got so frustrated by the process, they were worried they were going to end up with peanuts. So they started jumping to other leagues. So
gosh,
we'll see. That ESPN February 2025 fork in the road is an important one.
Here with David Glenn from the North Carolina Sports Network. Quick question before I get you out of here, though, regarding the Charlotte Hornets. Former Duke and NBA star J.J. Redick recently interviewed for their vacant head coaching position. He's never been a head coach before, unless you count, I think, his kid's AAU team or something like that he coaches, but he's never been a coach at high school, college, or pro. However, I will say that J.J. appears to be very smart when it comes to basketball plays, like how things work, spacing, things of that sort. You can see him on First Take kind of going at Stephen A. Smith. Him and LeBron James have a podcast out right now where the first 5 or 6 minutes of each episode, it's just JJ at the beginning explaining basketball terms they're going to be using in the show and like drawing on a whiteboard like plays that they're going to be describing or whatnot. So he's got the coach thing going on there. Do you see JJ Redick as a NBA coach in the future? And would you mind him being in Charlotte?
I could see him being an NBA head coach. I would not hire him if I were the owner of the Charlotte Hornets. I don't want a guy, no matter how high his basketball IQ, no matter how good he is on TV. And I like JJ as a person. He's been a guest on the David Glenn Show. I'm rooting for him to succeed as a coach or as a broadcaster, whatever he wants for his future. I just think there are enough structural aspects of being a head coach in the NBA especially that you either need to understand those things, and during the interview process, you'd have to prove to me that you understand those things, because those X's and O's at the front of the TV show or the podcast, they matter, of course. No doubt in my mind that JJ Redick knows basketball, including specifically how it's played at the NBA level. But it's about people management. It's about managing egos and big salaries. It's about building a quality coaching staff. And it is about X's and O's, which are different when you're in the heat of battle than the X's and O's that you get to comment on if you're a member of the media. So I'd be skeptical heading into that interview, but I would try to keep an open mind if JJ could show me that without that head coaching experience at any significant level, he would be ready for a head coaching gig in the NBA anyway.
I'm still holding out for Dawn Staley at USC, but my understanding is that she's already said that she wouldn't be interested in the job, but throw some money at her.
Yeah.
I'd rather Dawn come to back to Charlotte. It'd be crazy because she coached the Charlotte Sting, didn't she, or played for them, one or the other. But in the WNBA when we had a WNBA team here, so it'd be kind of coming back full circle. But I've actually come to grips with it being JJ. If they do hire him, I'm like, all right, I could. It's a young team.
It'd be fun.
Yeah, it'd be fun. We'll see what it is. He's fiery, it'd be a different direction. So we'll see how that goes. But follow DG on Twitter at David Glenn Show. Go rate and subscribe the David Glenn Show over at NC Sport Network's YouTube channel over on YouTube. Appreciate you being on, DG, and we'll have you on in a couple of weeks.
Always fun, Des. Keep up the good work.
That's it for franchise players here for the week ending Friday, May the 3rd, 2024. We'll see you next week with a brand new episode.